So now that we have learned how to calculate and how to lay out a hip rafter, we're going to come out here, we're going to come out of the shop, and then I'm going to give you a demonstration on how to cut it. But before we do that, I want to do a little review on some of the stuff that we did in the class. Okay, so right here's a mock-up where we're going to put our hip rafter. We're going to, one of the two most important things that we got to get is our span. And our span is always going to be in the direction that the commons are running, and the ridge will be running right in the middle of it. So our span is running in this direction. Here's our commons, and our span is going to be 6 feet. So we got 6 feet going that way for our span, and our pitch is an 8-inch unit rise. That's another name for the pitch. And then here's a hip that I already cut and put in. And then another thing that we're going to need to, that we have to get for our layout is our height over plate, our hat. And right over here, I laid out one right here. This is our hat, which is 2.5 inches. And then that's how much meat is left above the plate. And then that's going to come in. That's going to come into play when we drop our hip. And if you could. Right over here, I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. When we get to dropping our hip, we're going to have to drop our hip 2.5 right there. And in order, when we do the proper dropping of the hip, it's going to make it so all of these rafters plane in with the top of our hip, just like that. And they're all at the same level. Then another thing we're going to need to know is our overhang. Our overhang on our roof right here is 9 inches. And you put it right here, we got 9 inches there, and we'll have 9 inches coming this way. So we're gonna have to calculate how long we make our tail on our hip too. And the reason we do that is so when we put our fascia on, it'll all line up and all the points will hit right here on this extended tail. Okay, so, and one more thing I wanna point out. What we got going on here is called a tripod construction, and it's gonna have side common, and a king common. It's going to have 3 rafters holding up the ridge, and that's called a tripod construction. And up at the top of the ridge, I want to point out one more thing here. From the tip of the wall, that's where that red point is, to the middle of this ridge on a 45 right here, that's going to be our theoretical length. And as you can see, we start right here, but our hip starts back at a 45-degree angle from that point, so we're going to have to make deductions. And also another thing you're going to notice is that we have side cuts, and we're going to do the side cuts there. And we also have side cuts, it's called a double cheek cut on the tail also. Okay, let's go cut a rafter. So one of our first moves, now that we know our span is 6 feet. We want to get the run, the total run. So we divide the span in half. That's going to be 3 feet. So we take our 3 feet, and we know it's going to be a unit rise or pitch of 8 inches. So we're going to take that, and we're going to go 3 feet run, 8-inch pitch, and then since we're cutting a hip, we're going to hit hip valley. And it says 4, 8, and 5/16. Right down here. That's our theoretical length, also known as the line length. 4, 8, and 5/16. And we got our overhang at 9 inches, and I'm going to show you how we're going to get that. And we also got our height above plate, 2.5. Okay. So move over to our lumber. One of the first things you want to do is you want to crown this. You always want to crown it. You want to keep the crown up. And you look at it, look at the top, make sure it's got like the top part, the crown is always facing up. And here's our crown right here. So this is going to be our top. Okay, step 1. We're going to go ahead and draw a plumb line on the end here. Oh yes, and one more thing I wanted to add is whenever you do a hip, the difference between a hip and a common is commons are going to be 8 and 12, or whatever your unit rise plus 12. On a hip, it has to travel a further distance since it's running on a 45. So we're going to move this over to 17. And the way I do it is I put it right on the 8 on my unit rise, and then I put it right on the 17. And then that way it's always set, and it don't matter if you put it this way, that way, any way you put it, you're always going to have the same angle. Okay, so first things first, we're going to draw our plumb line. This is from our theoretical length. Then from there, I like to do it on the very end so I can hook my tape. I can pull down. And then our number was 4, 8, and 5/16. We'll go 4, 8, 5/16. And then I draw another plumb line. And this is going to be the corner of the building. Now, for our overhang on our roof is 9 inches. So the way I get my overhang for my tail on my hip is I do what's called bridging. I bridge the square. The frame is square. So I'll put this right on a 9. I'll come over here to 9, and that is 12 3/4. So that's how long my tail's got to be in order for all the 9-inch tails to meet at that end. So what I do now is I take this, I keep it on the same angle, and since I'm on this edge of the square, I'm going to go on the same edge right over here, and I'm going to mark 12 3/4. And you can turn your square around. As long as you got that same angle, it'll all match up. And then from all 3 of those points, that's where you're going to make your deductions, or you're going to drop your hip, or you're going to lay out for a double cheek cut. And we're going to start up here on the top. And our first deduction is going to be half the thickness of the ridge. So we want to make this deduction, we want to come at a 90-degree angle from our plumb line. So if you take a 2 inch and a half, and you draw a 45-degree angle on it, it's 2 1/8. And you want half the thickness of that, so you're going to go 1 1/16 inches. That'd be half of 2 1/8. And then you could draw another line right there, and this is going to be the point of your hip. Now, since we're going to cut a double cheek cut on it, we got to lay out our cut lines. And the way to do that is you're going to go 3/4 in each direction and draw 2 other lines. Now, I got a little shortcut for that. I'm going to show you guys. So, if I go 3/4 in each direction, that means that my lines are going to be 1 1/2 inches. 1 1/2 away. So what I do is I lay out one side, and the tongue on my framing square is 1 1/2 inches. So I just mark this side, then I mark this side. And these are going to be my cuts. And what's going to happen is I'm going to cut it all on one side. I lay it all out on one side, and I cut it all on one side. That way I don't have to flip it over. On this roof, it's a short hip rafter, but on a lot of roofs, you got some boards that are 20 feet long, and you don't want to be messing around with it. So what's going to happen is I'm going to come in set my saw on a 45, and it's going to come across this way. And then I'm going to cut back the other direction, and it's going to come across that way, and it's going to put that point right where it's got to be. And then we're going to move down this way. And now next we got to drop the hip. We got to drop the hip. So one thing I want to show you, I didn't point out, but I want to show you guys over here real quick, is the height above plate, our hap, I'm going to call it hap. Our hap has to be not at the point of the wall, but back 3/4 inch right here, the hap. If you leave it out here, you're going to be about, I don't know, in this roof of 8 and 12, it's probably going to be about 3/8 high. So you want to drop it down. And the way you get that, I'll show you that right over here, is you come back 3/4 inch. And then you draw you get another plumb line. Right at that plumb line, that's where you want to have 2 1/2 inches. So I come down here, and it's got to be 2.5 inches on the line, on that angle. Go 2.5, and then that's where you're going to put a level line. And whenever you draw a level line, use the body of the tongue. I mean, of the framing square. Okay, that's our C cut. Okay, next we want to lay out our double cheek cut. And our double cheek cut on the end is going to be 3/4 each way. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to lay out one side. That's 3/4 that way. Then I'm just going to lay out both sides of the square. And we're almost ready to cut. Got one more thing. I want to leave this tail the same thickness or the width of these other tails. These are all 3.5, and I want them all to match. So what I do is I scribe a line, and I'm going to rip this tail so it matches all the other tails. And I'm going to scribe it at 3.5. Now we're ready to cut. But what I like to do is I kind of like to give myself a, remind me where I'm going to make my cut. So I like to put a little crow's foot on everywhere I'm going to cut. Because since we made so many deductions, we got a lot of different lines to cut. And those are all my cut lines right there. Okay. I'm going to start over here on this end. Set that on a 45. And what do we got to do before we start cutting? One of the first things we got to do, right? We got to get safety glasses. Safety first. Okay, when you do these double cheek cuts and you're going to do them on all cut on one side, you're going to have to start with the line that's the furthest away from the rafter. In other words, the outside line. Because if you cut this line first, you just wiped out your layout line. And if you're cutting by yourself, a good way to do this is if you get a couple nails, kind of help hold it, just kind of tack them in place. Works pretty good this way. So since this saw is angled only one direction, you're going to want to cut one way, one line up one direction, and then the other line you're going to come back from the other side. Since I got it on a 45, I'm going to go ahead and cut this one out. Now the C cut. Some people like to overcut right here, but it's not a very good idea. As you can see, you only got a little bit of meat right there, and this is going to hold a lot of weight after we put on all our jack rafters. And so it's always good to cut right to that line and finish it up with a handsaw. And let's get this tail while we're at it. got a lot of them to cut, a jigsaw works really good. Sawzall works okay too. Got a little rough though. Okay. Let's see how it fits. Perfect. That's what you want right there. All right, have at it.